week. We would like to say welcome. Welcome to everybody for joining. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our Municipal Perspectives on Community Engagement webinar presented by the IAPT Northeast chapter. As I mentioned, we are going to spend a little bit of time talking with panelists today. We've got 3 different panelists from 3 different states in the Northeast, talking about their community engagement landscape, their work, how things have evolved over the last year. We'll spend about half an hour doing that, and then we'll open it up for a nice Q&A to make sure kind of any of the questions that you have about your own work or what might be happening in your community get answered. I'm Megan Rubel. I'll be your moderator and facilitator today, along with Nate Lash, who's on the call. And before we introduce the panelists, we want to go ahead and just give a quick welcome from our president, Nicole Marin. She's on the call. She might turn on her camera and wave in a second or say hello, but she has, there she is.
Hello.
Nicole has, for more than a year, worked to bring an IAP2 chapter to the Northeast, and we have now incorporated this emerging chapter to support public participation professionals in development training and networking across New England and New York. So Nicole, thank you so much for your work, for bringing us all together. Is there anything that you wanted to add or say?
I wanted to say thank you to everyone and the panelists for being here, and everyone who planned and made this event already a success. I see we have over 30 people on right now, so this is awesome, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, this whole idea of this meeting came out of a meeting that we had as a group where we got together, and instead of doing our planning, we started talking about all of the work that we were doing in our individual jobs and in our roles, and found that we had one of our kind of most in-depth discussions about the landscape of community engagement over the last year without really intending to. So we were hoping to kind of replicate that in this space today by bringing in some outside experts. So our panelists today are Alaa Abusalah from the city of Framingham, Sabrina Charney-Hull from the town of Newcastle, and Thomas Madden from the city of Stamford. I'll let them introduce themselves, and Alaa, we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Alaa Abusalah, and I work for the city of Framingham. So Framingham is located between Boston and Worcester, and it's recognized as the economic engine of the Metro West region. It's home to Bose, TJX, Staples, and a lot of these different corporations. We're a very diverse community. We have about 75,000 people. And what makes Framingham kind of special is until 2018, we were recognized as the largest town in the country. And then we officially adopted a home rule charter and became a city. We elected the first African American female mayor of the state. And just to give you a little bit of history, the community tried for many years to become a city. And the reason behind that was that there was a lack of accountability, there was a lack of representation, and voter participation was decreasing. So my position was created by the Home Rule Charter, and it was intentionally created as a way to fill that gap, be kind of like the person who bridges community and government, and facilitates those relationships. So it's what's like really awesome about having a citizen participation officer, specifically like in the mayor's office, is that you get to touch every piece of government and make sure that participation and engagement is embedded in all aspects of government. So a lot of what I do is I work and advise the mayor and staff, and just make sure that every system that we have in place gives the public an opportunity to engage and be part of the process. So, and I've been in this role for about 2 years, and we're coming up on our 4-year anniversary, and it's a very exciting place to be in. It's Framingham. Thank you.
Thanks, Alaa. All right, Thomas, we'll go to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I got to say, I like my picture much better than the way I look right now. I think COVID has put some serious bags under my eyes every time I look at myself in these Zoom calls. So my name is Thomas Madden. I'm Director of Economic Development for the City of Stamford. What do we actually entail with economic development? Well, we touch pretty much everything. I've got fingers and pies in engineering, transportation, planning, zoning, building department, fire marshal, CDBG, our grants, everything else that we have going on here. And We are a growing city. We're one of the fastest growing cities here in Connecticut. We have a daytime population now. We estimate about 132,000 people. That is up from our 2010 census, which was 122,000 people. And pre-COVID, we were, a daytime population of well over 200,000 people here. We have 9 Fortune 1000 companies here, and we're growing constantly. Most people don't realize, Stamford's got 17.5 million square feet of office space here. And, we're just busy filling this stuff and helping the companies. We've also got an innovation district that we've been working on with both UConn and a lot of the corporations to help with the different entrepreneurs. And we just started a great program with Building One Community. It's the Immigrant Enterprise Initiative, and it's looking at our undocumented and our new immigrants into the country on how they can actually start up businesses here, and they're understanding the business process and trying to get people involved in our own economy here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sabrina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Charney Hall. I have been a practicing planner in Westchester County, New York for over 25 years. I've spent the last 10 years of my career working for the town of Newcastle, New York. We are most famous for our hamlet called Chappaqua. The town itself is about 23 square miles. We have a population of about 17,000 people. We are primarily a single family residential community. We have 2 commercial hamlets. When I say commercial hamlets, we're very small scale. We don't even reach the realm of being a village. I have spent time most recently trying to change legislation, Euclidean zoning legislation, and create form-based zoning where we can kind of guarantee forward momentum and enrich our business areas, our hamlet areas. The pandemic has further exacerbated our commercial areas. We had less than 3% of our land use towards commercial land use, and it's even smaller than that now. And we're looking to put more feet on the street to diversify our land use and to really bring diversity not only to land use, but to our population as well. So all of the major national issues that you're hearing about in the news and in social media, we're living it live in the town of Newcastle right now. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much. I feel like that was a really nice segue into this, what's going to be a really great discussion with the 3 of you. So we have some questions that we've prepared and just hope to kind of hear from you all as you feel kind of moved to respond, I suppose. So I want to make sure I'm no longer sharing my screen. Great. Okay. And we will go ahead and get started. And again, feel free to jump in and kind of share your thoughts. But we wanted to get started by having you all tell us how your community engagement efforts might have changed or shifted in the past year. Sabrina's ready. Let's do it.
I'm going to start. One thing I'm going to say is today we were informed that there's New York State legislation that is calling for making virtual meeting a permanent form of communication. And so here to that. As a practicing planner for over 25 years, the pandemic has afforded us with a bright new horizon of public engagement. We have seen much greater numbers of our public participating in our local meetings. Not only our hot topic and kind of the controversial issues that as planners we always see, but because people can do it from their living room couches, can feed their kids and sit down with dessert and listen to a meeting. We've had more public engagement from people who would never otherwise step foot into a town hall. And that is amazing. And, as a practicing planner, I don't want to see us lose that because the pandemic restrictions are being lifted. right? And so to have that as a form of acceptable open meetings law, I think would be a great benefit, because it has really given us an opportunity to converse with populations we would not otherwise have been able to. And I say this also from a municipality who has worked very hard to help those in our community who don't have the technology or the capability to connect virtually. We've done a lot of work to make it accessible to everybody, even though we could not meet in person. So I'm gonna leave it there for somebody else to pick up.
I might come back and ask you a little bit more about bridging that digital divide, but Thomas and Alaa, how has your work changed?
So I'll let you go first, and I'll back clean up.
Right. So in Framingham, same thing. We have seen an increase in participation, given the fact that people could just do it from home. And now we're trying to figure out, well, how do we sustain this? Like, shouldn't be just one or another. The world, society's changing, and we have to be able to adapt to that. So we have noticed that there's been more engagement in terms of like the surveys too. There's more opportunities for us to be out there, not just, 7 o'clock once a month in a meeting. No, we're present all the time. There's always something happening. There's always something going on. And in a way, it encourages people to also not just participate in meetings and on that end, but also apply to be the ones who are making some of these decisions, like serving on boards and commissions. So the more that they learn and the more that the stuff is out there, it has a much greater impact than just the one event or survey or thing that the city is talking about. So I definitely think that COVID has shed a light on the fact that there needs to be different methods and access points to government, and it would be a total shame to lose this after COVID.
Agreed. Thomas?
So it was interesting. So we had a governor's executive order that came down last March and basically said that all meetings were to be held virtually or through a conference call. And we had a lot of municipalities all of a sudden start to scramble here to try to figure out, well, how do you actually do this? We had talked about it years before. You have a lot of legislation within bylaws, within different groups of the city that, committees that say, oh, no, you cannot do a conference call or anything like that. You got to be in person. And, this was a really big wake up call, I think, for a lot of municipalities on looking at those policies and how to change them. And so we went to a full Zoom meeting. And I got to say, it is so nice to be able to sit at home and not be at City Hall for 7 to 8 hours as you go through these meetings and then drive home to get to your house. And this has been a great sort of time saver for a lot of staff, because we can actually go back, parent, and do all the things that we need to do. Much like the other two municipalities, we've seen an increase in participation. And it's been great because people are now be able to contact us. But one of the things we did find is as you move into the lower socioeconomic and ethnically diverse areas, we just didn't have the broadband, or we didn't have the internet capacity, or what we found out is they just actually didn't have the computers to be able to do this. So through the schools, we were able to get every student a brand new laptop. And a lot of the parents were using those laptops to participate in our public dialogue on a lot of the issues that we had here. One of the things that we realized, and we're probably going to use some of our ARP money, is we had a gig Wi-Fi network in the downtown. We are going to try to expand that into some of these areas so that the people who can't afford broadband or they're trying to work off their phone, we can get them a much better service for their houses. Because again, not everybody can afford $100 to $200 a month for high-speed internet. And so as a city, we're thinking this is a much better way to help out with that participation, but also to help out our students as well.
Amazing. Thank you. That's a nice segue into the digital divide. Are there any other methods that you all used or heard about to reach those folks that we know don't have the desktop computer, no longer have access to the libraries or school, or maybe even older adults that are kind of struggle with technology in general?
What we did is we actually did a lot of hand holding, particularly with our seniors. You know, the Senior Meals on Wheels program would make sure that, you know, residents who wanted to participate knew about meetings. We'd give them agendas, schedules, calendars, so that they had paper copies as, you know, we were delivering their meals. We would give them this information to read through, and we kind of piggybacked on existing programs that were occurring. If the library was running something, you know, we would make sure we had information about the board meetings, the topics that everybody, you know, was interested in. Getting them connected was a little bit more difficult because people didn't want to be with people. And it was a matter of making sure that they had the information that they could read and submit comments, you know, through the mail or other means that met their needs.
Alaa, anything to add there?
Yeah, I was going to say very similar to Sabrina. We started leveraging our partnerships. Like, we were working very closely with school department and the senior center for food security. And we used that, especially during like the census outreach. We were, you know, putting flyers and everything that was coming out from our partners. And that helped us like really dive into the hard to count communities and the communities who are historically haven't been engaged with the city.
We're getting some comments about people loving the idea of using the mail. I think the Meals on Wheels printed calendar is really smart. We also heard some stories from folks we talked about in our previous meeting that were setting up voicemail boxes at City Hall that those senior residents could call and just leave a message based on what they might have heard about in their communities or watched on the screen. So it's been kind of fun to see that these more analog modalities have come back into play, in addition to this really rapid modernization of online engagement. So
the challenge, I think, is now, right? How do we maintain the technology and perform the old stuff too, you know, the in-person? And I can tell you, we're struggling a little bit, you know, as a town. We have a very small assembly room, you know, where if you fit, you know, even though the CDC has lifted social distancing requirements, people still don't want to sit so close to each other anymore. And, you know, you'd go beyond the footprint of our town hall if you were to have everybody spread out. And so, you know, we're trying to update antiquated meeting places that were never, ever designed to have technology. And it's quite expensive, you know, to think about now. How do you get the people in the building? How do you get your board members in the building? How do you create an avenue for people to come and listen, and also zoom in where they feel they're a part of the meeting as well? So that is our current challenge, and we're working diligently to set up spaces, but there's very few spaces in a town. You know, whether it's a library auditorium, a school auditorium, or even a public auditorium that are connected right now. And so that's kind of our current challenge. And we're working very diligently to try and get it to a point where you can do it all from one place. And I will say, as the director of planning, it's me. You know, I'll be running the meeting and running the Zoom and, you know, making sure that everything is working, because we just don't have the staff to handle all disciplines. And that's kind of where the shortcoming is going to reveal itself.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Tom.
I'll agree with Sabrina on that one. And that's, you know, it's interesting because, like I said, with the increase in participation, you know, I think our mayor here, he had an agenda to make sure every meeting was videotaped or at least broadcast so people can watch it at their own convenience. And we've continued that all the way along. So even if you couldn't make that public hearing, it's still listed on our website. What we did do through COVID is we actually changed our entire website. We put out a brand new one, and it's really now resident based, getting resident information out there, and the meetings right up front. So it's not hidden in some department page. It is right on the front for the information that they're looking for and the links to be able to get to these meetings and the information getting out there. I think, you know, the technology has been absolutely wonderful on this, but I think where we're going to find problems is later on when the budgets come, you know, next year after we lose the ARP and everything else, and they realize the true cost of keeping this technology running is where I think you're going to see some people in some smaller towns going, well, we just can't afford, you know, the $60,000 to $100,000 a year to keep this technology up and running, or to have someone employed to run this. and they'll start cutting it back and start to, as the, COVID dies down here, they'll bring everybody back into the meeting again. And the one thing I've noticed with the meetings is now that we've been doing them on Zoom, they're a lot less hostile. With the Zoom, you don't have a mob mentality that is out there. And that's been really interesting as we start to discuss really sensitive items. And you don't have that sort of intimidation factor of packing the room, but you still get that chance of everybody allowing to speak. So.
I feel like Sabrina has something to say about that.
I know what Sabrina's going through right now, so.
And I'm going to tell you, Thomas, it's not less hostile. You can click the button and mute or shut it down easier. But you still get hundreds of people raising their hands on the side of the bar. What's different is you have people who are willing to sit and listen for longer. And you have the flexibility to change the times of the meetings, right? And so as a government, our meetings occur at 7:30 at night, and these big controversial projects are running past midnight. Well, we can shift it a little bit earlier or choose to do a morning meeting. So people who aren't good at night can come to the morning meeting. There's just more flexibility to get more people involved through the use of the technology. But I would argue that it's not less hostile.
I'm not changing zoning like you, so we're good.
Megan, I do want to jump in and touch on something and ask if folks could talk a little bit more about that. We got a comment about someone else facing the challenge of delivering multi-channel public involvement while also needing to be very budget conscious. And Sabrina, something you said, which is, sort of, we got to where we're at, and the challenge is now. Like, how do we move forward? So recognizing that, maybe the big traditional public meeting isn't as effective at getting engagement from a more diverse group of people. How are you all thinking about sort of marketing internally what you think is good engagement practices? And how are you planning on taking those forward?
I think that we're going to end up at the end of the day, due to budget constraints and everything that we're doing, with both. We're going to be sitting in a public meeting with people in the audience, as well as a computer that, or it's called a Zoom board, where you can have, people up on a board, and there's going to need to be a moderator. And like I said, I'm probably going to be the person who's going to be doing it all, who's going to, oh, so-and-so has their hand raised. You've got 3 minutes to comment. That's what's going to happen. And I think that we're going to go back to the old way of doing things, but introduce this new technology. It's very much like, I run the Newcastle building department, planning, engineering, zoning, and building. And during the pandemic, we converted, the moment we shut down, to doing everything via email. We did not do online permit submission. We don't have a system set up for that. We have our internal computer systems where we track permits, but we got to the point where we were responding to literally every person who sent in an email in 24-hour notice. Now we are opening back up. What does that mean? Are we shutting down our email communication? No, we're going to limit, at least in the beginning, the in-office appointments, right? Appointment only. If you walk in, we're going to advise you to go back out and set an appointment, but we're not going to stop the email. And we are inundated right now. We have over 2,000 emails a day coming into my office that's staffed by 3 people. It's too much work for the existing staff. And so we're going to have to move smartly and slowly under this new reality and kind of see how it goes, because we don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, so we fared much better. We actually moved to an online permitting system. So we have a separate permitting through View Permit, separate website, and you can file for all your permits, upload your documents. And we've been doing that for several years now here, because we realized that, we had to sort of change with the technology, because when you looked at some of the inspectors' desks or the reviewers' desks, they were just getting inundated with huge reams of paper. And when you look at plans after plans after plans, and when you're talking, we've built over 12,000 apartment units here in Stamford over the last 6-7 years. These are some tall buildings that we've got to go through. And when you start going through the mechanics, so, one of the first things we started doing is everybody used to be working on those little small Dell screens. We are now getting everybody 42 and 55-inch monitors for their desks to be able to review plans. So you're almost getting a full-size plan, but it's in a digital format that you can start to scroll through and make through and allow everybody to make comments on it, and a system that actually kicks it over to the next reviewer once you've finished everything. And we have everybody who can then upload the comments back to the applicant and have them respond back and then upload it again. So, we're looking at how do we minimize the contact, but also look at, making the workflow much more efficient. And it's still not perfect. I was just pointing out, in Connecticut, we have liquor permits here that need the zoning official to sign off. And then you have to get the fire marshal official to sign off. And then you got to get the town clerk. So we've had cases where it gets put in the box downstairs. The zoning official signs off at 2 weeks later, puts it back in the box for them to grab, and they just walk over and put it into the fire marshal box. Week and a half later, he finally signs off on it, and then it's got to get moved over to the town clerk, which is another 2 weeks. And I can go do that in approximately half hour if I don't have to, shoot the bull with them as I get them to sign this stuff. But it's all about the efficiency. Why couldn't we get the zoning official to walk over to the fire marshal to get him to sign it, or send it electronically, have it bang, put a signature on it, and go boom, okay, now it's off to the clerk, have her sign it. But it's still not perfect, and we haven't come across a good permitting system yet that answers all of our questions and needs. And I keep telling my son to start programming it, and he would make his fortune, because every city would be scooping this thing up if you could customize it the way most cities want it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that COVID has shown us, is that our systems are just not designed for what we do today. So what we did for constituent calls, because when we went virtual, any request or business had to be done over the phone or email. So we redeployed library staff and had them answer calls, so we can centralize everything and make it easier so people don't have to get bounced to 100 departments before getting an answer. So we're using that data to build a case that we need this system long-term, that it creates opportunities for efficiency. It saves money, saves time, it creates better customer service. And I think one thing that will really help us to make a case for the hybrid meetings is the data. Like I wish, like I thought of, collecting that information from day one, because since we started, we've hosted over 500 virtual meetings over the past year. And I know that there were a lot more people than regular meetings in person, but that actual data will be like kind of the golden piece to sell this, that there needs to be a way to keep this and sustain it.
Yes, and along with that, one of the things that I've been working on, because we've been toying with an online permitting system for a long time now, is that we now know we definitely need one, and it's really finding the one that it closely represents what my office needs, not what the town needs, because it's very easy to say we need a town-wide system, but we need to kind of do triage right now, kind of fix it where we're bleeding. And so, with the budget cycle this year, that's where the truth will be told. You come in, as a department head, I'll make a proposal to take action to solve these critical issues, and then the town board will be the decision maker as to whether or not they're going to use the budget cycle to fund it. And that's really what it's going to come down to. Zoom is great, but I still don't know, when you have a public hearing and you have it in person, people have to sign in, provide their address, and then they can, provide a note card to comment with their comments written on them, or they identify who they are. With Zoom, you're relying on somebody to tell you where they live, and they could be calling in from anywhere. So, we really need to develop more. I would love to see more systems where we could really identify what part of the community you are calling in from, because I think it really helps identify who is participating in an issue. Is it somebody who's just the one issue participant, or are they a community-wide participant? And that really changes the dynamic of the conversation.
Absolutely. We have a great question from Jeff. I'm just going to hop in with a attendee question, and we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming with some of the other pre-questions that we wrote. But I think Jeff asked a question that speaks nicely to what you all are kind of talking about with constituent capacity building and your own staff limitations and time limitations, and of course, all of the other crazy things that are going on in the world right now. Have you all found any ways to tap residents oh, I lost my question. Have you found any interesting ways to tap residents to help with workflows and engagement processes during this past year or so?
So we've really gone after social media. We actually have more followers now than the newspaper, which helps us out immensely. And we're very proud of that. We have our Fix at Stamford, and we push a lot of that out. So if you have complaints, comments, it gets people engaged, and then we send them an email of the work back to them. So if they complain about a pothole, we have the guy take a picture of the pothole, and it gets emailed back to the person saying we took care of this. We use a lot of social media like Nextdoor, and I have a program called Zen City that monitors all of the social media out there. And so we've got them tapped into, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we get a report, or I can run reports or find out what people are thinking for the people that are not engaged. And then we can actually plan a strategy to go out and engage those people. So if they're the silent majority, but they, all of a sudden they're turning into a keyboard warrior on Facebook, we know how to get to them and talk to them or get the right information out. So, I've interjected myself numerous times on the Facebook comments or the next door neighbor comments and say, no, this is the actual what's happening here. This is Thomas Madden, Director of Economic Development. Here's what's actually happening. This is the correct information. And if you'd like to see more, I usually throw the link up to where it is on our city website. So then that way it stops the misinformation that gets out there, or I can help with, problem solving of things like that. And that's worked out really good. So, especially with the George Floyd case last year and the protests that we were having here in Stamford, we did a lot of reach out through Instagram to the organizers to say, how can we help you, make sure that you have a safe protest walk, and they're going to, a lot of them are like, well, we're not getting permits. And we're like, that's fine, but we want to make sure the police block off the traffic so you guys don't get hit. Tell us what your route is so we can help protect you and, have your First Amendment right to do what you want to do. But we're here as a city to help you out on some of this stuff. And, it was interesting because a lot of them were shocked, like, whoa, hang on a second. Or the mayor was meeting with them to talk about certain issues that were being brought up in our community. Again, our community is very, very diverse. We are, in terms of, we're just at the 50% mark of being of white. And then it's basically Latino, African-American, and Asian make up the other 50% with a high number of Latinos. And it's, it's able to get out into the community so we're not leaving anybody behind. So again, using that social media like Zen City and the Nextdoor app, that really helps out. The other thing we're hiring a lot more of is, Spanish speak to be able to get out into the community. So all our flyers now are coming out, both English and Spanish. We do a little bit of Creole as well, just because we have a large Creole population here, to make sure that they were engaged. And a lot of that came from our census outreach that we, as we started to find our neighborhoods and everything else to help define our own strategy internally here.
Great. Sabrina or Alaa, any ways that you've kind of tapped residents in the last year to empower them to help out?
What I'm going to say is social media has been used both positive, but more negatively to spread fake news regarding public projects. You know, you need to have somebody on the town side or the city side who's savvy enough to build your virtual platform, if you will, and to keep up with the platform. You know, jumping from, you know, the brick and mortar walk into town hall type mentality, being thrown into the technology, creating, you know, that whole virtual world is a whole other hurdle for small town USA. You know, Thomas is in a big city compared to a small town, and there's definitely a separation between resources when it comes to that. So that's what I'll say.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'll add that, you know, we have the ability to pay for some of this. So like Zen City is not cheap. But we realize that in order to get out to the community, we're going to have to pay for some of this new technology to track the new technology that is out there. You know, there's lots of other stuff, like we're just moving over to an online platform to handle all of our social media, so we can program everything to go out on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, so that as we have events coming up or meetings coming up, it gets an automatic blast through everything, and we just schedule it ahead of time. So, you know, again, we're trying to think outside the box as a municipality and think more like a corporation, you know, as part of doing our sales and customer service management.
Sabrina, I feel your pain in terms of the lack of resources. That's something that we just don't have. We don't have a communication department. We don't have anyone who's like specializing in social media. Each kind of department does its own thing. And I think one thing that I've seen like benefit us in terms of reaching constituents is leveraging the established groups that already exist in the community, like religious institutions. Once we started working on the census about 2 years ago, we like continued those relationships because we know how important they are for both sides, not just the city side. I mean, they access us when they need anything, and it's just helps in the long term. And also we have over like 400 board and commission members who are appointed to different public bodies, and they are our voices as well. So, you know, although they represent one board, they're also representing an entire community. Like they have family, they have friends, and we make sure to use that.
That's a great idea.
Great. Thank you all. We've got 20 minutes left. This discussion has been flying. We're going to invite the participants that have questions for the panelists to go ahead. If you'd like to turn your camera on, Nate and I will call on you and you can ask your questions of the group. And while everyone is doing that, we did have one question come in through chat that I'll ask you all from Jennifer McDonald. And Jennifer wants to know, now that your groups are going to begin meeting in person, how are the panelists planning to continue live streaming meetings? This is especially hard for the smaller committees who meet at the library, low-tech conference room. Sabrina, you spoke to this a little bit, but maybe you can start. Being a small town person, how do you, if outfitting isn't an option, how would you imagine doing this work moving forward?
Prior to the pandemic, we had the capabilities, you know, we had great monitors in all of our meeting rooms, and it's just a matter of turning the technology on right now, to be quite honest with you. But what I envision is that there's going to be a meeting grab. We were already short on space with all sorts of meetings occurring in our very few meeting venues in the community. And now it's going to be even worse because not every meeting venue has the capability to have the technology. So there's going to be a hierarchy of groups and who gets the good room versus the other rooms, if you will.
We looked at one room and it was $20,000 to hook up the cameras, the mixers, and to have it all go back through. You know, and that's not even including, like, we use Granicus for our online meeting presentations, and you know, that contract right there is huge because of all the boards and commissions. And this is, you know, this has been, I think, the biggest problem. And Sabrina and I talked about this when I was in Westchester, just the cost of this stuff as we try to bring in with these small towns. It's just way too much money. And everybody sort of falls back and says, okay, we'll just throw them all to a meeting room because I can put them in there. It doesn't cost me anything. And I can just set up a camera and broadcast out over my local, you know, town cable channel, and we'll just do it that way, and that's going to be the easiest. So.
Right. And you know, the bottom line is, which is why it's so important to get the legislation adopted, is that it gives the teeth to why you should embrace all forms. You know, it's really important to you know, get the virtual meetings as an acceptable form of communication, because if it's not, then it's going to disappear. So I employ everybody to kind of make sure that your state adopts the virtual meetings, because it's the only way that it will become permanent. And, you know, I kind of want to go back to, you know, the town clerk serves as the records management officer, right? So all plans, all resolutions, meeting minutes, they're all kept in perpetuity in paper form. Microfiche at one point was an acceptable means of technology. This email communication, electronic document, that's not part of New York State records retention policy, right? So regardless if we issue a permit electronically or we accept an application electronically, we are still beholden to the record management requirements of New York State. So the antiquated systems need to be updated to move with the way that people are moving and learning, participating and listening. And, you know, the pandemic has kind of jump-started that. As we saw the pandemic really further decimate retail, right? And move to an online shopping world, the pandemic has jump-started virtual communication and electronic processing like no other. So let's take advantage of it and make it happen.
Yeah, I think for us, if it wasn't for COVID relief funds, I can't even imagine how we would have managed all these meetings. And so I think going forward, like I want to make sure that we do take advantage of the fact that we are where we are. And now how do we figure this out and sustain it long term? Because it just doesn't make sense to go back to the way that we were operating.
But I also think too, I just want to say the public participation is invaluable, right? So, and I'm not talking whether you're for something or against something, but just to have the number of people participating versus what it was like pre-COVID is phenomenal. And you know, it's about giving people an opportunity to have a voice. That's what we do. We serve the public.
Yeah.
Hey, Stephen, looks like you've got a question. Go for it.
Yeah, I put something in the chat for Massachusetts people, but it's probably the same thing that's going on everywhere in all states, which is they're coming up with more permanent or better legislation that allows for the remote participation we've all become used to and don't want to leave behind. And anyway, so it's a link down there as far as people signing up to do that. But I think the most important thing is that the decisions on drafting whatever legislation is born or comes up, I think IEP 2 needs to be aware of those situations. We need to be in the room, probably remotely, to help make sure that legislation, that once it's written, it's there for 10 years or until the next pandemic. So we need to be there. So yeah, I'm saying be aware that there will be opportunities in the next few months, I believe, for us to help make for better legislation, and as opposed to people who are non-techies, non-experienced. People like Sabrina certainly, you know, would be an example of how that you need to be able to put this sentence in or that, and so you won't be constricted by somebody coming back later and saying, well, it doesn't say that in the law. Well, it should have, you know, but so we need to be there. So I'm just warning people to, over the summer, you might be.
Participate.
Yeah, I got to say, you know, we're pushing that here in Connecticut as well. And I got to say, it's been so nice not to have to drive an hour and a half up to Hartford and then sit there for 7 to 8 hours to testify for 3 minutes on a bill. I can get so much more work done sitting at my desk and waiting my turn because it's all numbered now. It just is a much more efficient way to do things. So.
We're getting very meta. The participation folks need to also participate. I love this. Okay, another question we have. Everyone in this room has tried a lot of things over the past year. Some have worked, some haven't. What are some of the things that you know that you will continue to do in perpetuity? And what are some of the things that you've tried and that just did not fit for your community?
And I'll just say we got a question about from Christian asking if folks have used any virtual engagement platforms like PlaySpeak or Co-Urbanize. And so as you answer Megan's question, if you could also maybe if you've used specific tools or platforms that you love and want to keep, we'd love to hear that too.
So the city of Stamford, we have not used any of the engagement platforms that are out there. I've used in the past, I've used like Basecamp and, put stuff out there through Basecamp to, to allow people to participate, but we just didn't do that here. We really relied on the Zoom and just the written letters coming in. Now, does the virtual engagement platforms have a place? I believe they do. And I think it sparks some very good conversation and people can sit there and actually analyze the plans, move plans around as opposed to looking at a Zoom and you want to look at something else but you're stuck on that one Zoom screen as people try to go, well, I'm past this. Let me see what my real question is, or when staff tries to flip through the plans, trying to find out the plan that they're looking for. That, like I said, I like that, but a lot of municipalities, it comes down to the cost again. You just to run public engagement, all of a sudden small municipalities are going to have to be put aside. By my own estimates, it's up to $100,000 plus a year, which, if I can hire another police officer or a garbage man or something like that, well, I'm going to do that because that's what gets me elected, as opposed to the engagement side. So.
And I'm going to say that, we've looked at the engagement platforms, right? And the question with the engagement platforms is, what are we getting that's different than the social media? And our town supervisor puts out an e-newsletter twice a week. What is different between that and our website that hosts all this information and maybe needs a revamp to bring things up into the front for the community more so. But it does come down to dollars and priorities. Right. And so if there's an e-newsletter, then that's working. We're doing Zoom meetings. That's working. We're moving forward. That's working. So it's really difficult. With every major project that my town undertakes, we undertake a public participation avenue, alongside it. So people are aware of what's going on, can voice their concerns. But it is difficult for every project to create a new platform. We just don't move that quickly, and they're not sustaining. And, for me, it's always the question of how much staff time is needed to really create a quality outreach and education platform for the community to weigh in, right? Because again, we're limited staff. It's the same people on every single project. Oh, it's my office is writing another 5 grants. Oh, my office is manning, 11 boards, but we are a small staff, small town, little resources. And, in Westchester, we have a lot of resources compared to our much smaller municipalities who just don't have the resources that Newcastle has. So we're fortunate, that we can put technology in our meeting rooms, not all of our meeting rooms, but our large meeting rooms, and kind of work towards keeping the virtual world alive a little longer than most.
Yeah, I've used Co-Urbanize, I think it's called, in the past. Before I was in my current role, I used to work in the planning and economic development department for the city, and we used it very specific for a project. And I managed a lot of like the back end information, and that took time. And it was very project based. So I think, like, to add to what Sabrina was saying, it's not only just like having the platform, but it's also having somebody who's going to actually manage and oversee, updating it constantly on top of doing the regular city website and, with the clerk's office and all the other pieces. It really all comes down to capacity in terms of staffing and cost.
a lot of appreciation in chat for you all talking about limited staffing, limited resources. That sounds like a shared issue. So thank you.
Well, I'm just going to say Thomas started with the bags under his eyes. I had a lot less gray.
Yeah.
The pandemic for professionals has made our workday run around the clock.
Yeah,
Okay. We
I agree
were
with you.
almost around the clock beforehand, but now it's definitely around the clock.
Now, I would say March last year, we were working 7 days a week at 12 to 14 hours a day. And that was up until mid-July here in Stamford. I was basically living in my office. And like I said, I have so much less hair now and bags under my eyes. And I think it took a total of 5 days off last year just for mental health, because I had to, you know, and it's like I said, I think there's going to be some ramifications of what it is, because now that we've become all of a sudden, as I think, more productive, it's only because we're not seeing our families put in more hours. They expect that same level as we move forward, as we come out of COVID. And it's just like, we can't keep this pace.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and that goes across the board, you know, the responding to every single email within a 24-hour period cannot continue when you're opening up your doors, when you're having to have in-person meetings, when you're not sitting in your home where you can throw a load of laundry in between a call. You know, that type of service, you know, I have to tell my staff, it's okay, make it 48 hours, you know, see how you could do with 48 hours. And if you need 3 days, we could talk about it. You know, if you need 4 days, I mean, you know, we are right now in an extremely experimental stage, and, you know, and I'm fighting with my bosses to kind of, hey, can we just slow this down and see how it goes? Because it's the same staff. It's the same people on every single project that everyone wants to undertake.
I would say my wife, we joked all the time. I'd be sending out emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, I know you're not texting Jake from State Farm. Who are you talking to, you know? And I'm like, I'm just trying to, you know, keep up, because when you're getting 300-400 emails a day, and you've got to sort through the crap and find out what the real issues are, it's really difficult. And then you got to flag them. And then, you know, when you finally get home, you get some free time to start just responding back to people. It just eats up your time. So.
Yeah. And I think we'll end with sort of this last question. And there's been a thread that's I've seen in the chat and in this conversation about folks feeling inundated with, you know, the number of comments, which is great. You know, like, we wanted to hear from more people, and we did. That's takes a lot of time, a lot of staff resources. It's increased the intensity and the pace of our work. Yolando, I think in the chat, said there's more meetings everywhere. And so I just sort of ask folks, from your vantage point, like, is this sustainable? How are you taking care of yourselves? And as you think about how to, you know, do this work and keep doing it well, what are some of the things you're thinking about?
I don't think this is sustainable at all. I think somebody wrote in the chat that they kind of have like 2 different jobs. That's exactly what I feel. And on top of that, I'm literally one person. There's no department or anything. I think there's a need for us to like be realistic in this world, that we have been working harder and we have been doing more, but at some point there needs to be some slowing down. And I think the COVID funds that are on their way are helpful, and I think grants are helpful and all that, but we always need to be thinking long term, and I guess like trying to, you know, make a case, like, and understand how are we bringing, how is having more staff or having more resources going to bring value and help us grow. And I think keeping data on the front line and as a tool to paint that picture, which is just like another thing to do.
No, I agree completely. It's like I said, we're going to have to change as we move forward on how we do a lot of this stuff. And, you know, the public engagement has been absolutely great, but we've been inundated, and I don't think we have had time to stop and think about the future of how we staff this stuff up and how do we keep this engagement. Because as soon as we start to drop down and go back to the regular ways we had pre-COVID, we're going to find the residents getting really upset going, this is not right. You did this and then you took the service away from me. So, but I don't want to pay for the service in my taxes. So, you know.
Right. And I think, again, you know, having the ability to take the time to assess instead of opening up appointments all day in the office, let's keep it half a day. So we know we definitely have a designated other half of day to manage the rest, you know, and so begging for that time, you know, not caving under pressure. You know, right now we've been open with limited appointments for about a month now, and they're still not full, right? So, you know, I don't suspect that we're going to be bombarded by the public coming in. You know, in fact, our contractors like to be able to drop things off in a drop box by the police department, you know, all hours of the night, so to speak. And we're not going to take that away, but, you know, people I think are going to need to, you know, take a deep breath and give us some time to process what's needed. You know, and I always say at this point in time, it doesn't matter if we take an extra day or a week to do something, because given the construction industry today, they're going to be waiting on the other end anyway. So we'll see how we go, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. And, you know, I don't live in any of your towns, but I very much appreciate the work you do. Just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you to everyone who hopped on and listened and participated, engaged. Jessica just put our, if you want to find out more information about IAP2 and what it is and how to get connected, we'd love to continue the conversation. We also have a LinkedIn group, and we hope to put on more events like this for folks who are doing this work to be able to share best practices and, you know, sort of help console each other a little bit in the stress and the chaos that is community engagement and public involvement. Megan, do you have any other things you wanted to say?
No, just thank you, Alaa, Thomas, and Sabrina so much for joining us today and for your expertise. It's really nice to hear from folks, and to the point of the chat, everyone's kind of in the same boat, even though our situations are different. So it's really just appreciate your time and hearing from you.
Yeah.
I'll throw out there, if you come through Stamford, I will buy you a beer if you stop by and come for a visit, because that gets me out of the office.
Absolutely. If anybody's ever in Newcastle, same offer.
Framingham too.
All righty. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Take care, everybody. Bye.